there is one man described by the Godfather Don Vito himself as Michael's Luca Brasi. When Michael took over the Corleone empire, it wasn't going to be easy. Although he had a tight-knit inner circle full of highly skilled individuals, Michael was up against some of the most powerful men in the country. Add to that the fact that they're traitor in their midst, things were not looking good. However, one man who owed his life to Michael and was above all suspicion, at the same time the newest member of the Corleone family inner circle, this was the menacing Albert Neri. Neri represented the new generation of Corleones, one more sophisticated and equipped for this new era. But the thing is, we really don't know much about him. But what we found out was truly unbelievable. So join us and we'll finally uncover the truth behind this mysterious character. Let's begin. Hey, and by the way, do me a favor. Take a look at the like and subscribe button. Don't be a gavone. Hit them once and comment inner circle. Come on, let's get this to 10,000 likes. Loyalty like that don't go unnoticed. Come on, before I gotta start making some phone calls.
That's a Sicilian message.
Chapter 1. The NYPD Cop. It's 1955 in an apartment in the Bronx. Al Neri takes out his old police uniform and begins to prepare for the duty at hand. The dreaded task of taking out the current most powerful mob boss in the country, the Corleone family's biggest rival, Don Emilio Barzini. As he unloads and reloads his .38 special revolver, he stretches out his shirt and waxes his shoes. Memories of all the events that led him up to this point starting to play back. Al began as a New York cop who was all but lazy or corrupt. Nevertheless, he served almost independently and administered his own kind of justice daily. He would constantly patrol the streets with his heavy flashlight, an effective tool he regularly employed in whooping the heads of Italian youths who'd scold them for tainting the Italian image. On one occasion, Al was upset with how crammed the streets were due to the careless parking of cars owned by powerful officials alongside the street. With no regard for the road laws, he previously reported to his precinct, who then asked him to mind his own business. But on this particular day, he had enough. The road was impassable, so he decided to take matters into his own hands and do the unexpected. He smashed all the windscreens with his flashlight. This carried on for a week, and soon complaints and protests poured into the police station by diplomats and politicians. However, he saw nothing wrong in his actions. Even with all this backlash, in his mind, he successfully got those people to realize their wrongs and would have gladly done it again if need be. Meanwhile, Al was married to a woman whom he loved dearly, Rita. However, that too would come down in flames due to Al's unusual way of doing things. One day, Al and Rita visited his older sister who lived with her 20-year-old son, Tommy, who had the exact type of attitude Neri had no tolerance for. And so it wasn't going to end well. After witnessing Al beat up the boy mercilessly for talking rudely to his mother, this proved too much for her, therefore wanted a divorce. This really hurt Al. Al tried to make her see reason, but she would have none of it. Al refused to let go of Rita, but things were about to get a lot worse for Al. After receiving a call from Harlem, long story short, Neri ended up taking out a man called Wax Baines, a criminal kingpin who was responsible for killing a number of innocent victims. Al hit Baines so hard with his flashlight he ended up dying in hospital 2 days later. However, to his surprise, Al was convicted for voluntary murder and using excessive force. He was then immediately laid off from duty and sent to jail to wait for his sentencing. He was to serve up to 10 years in prison. While incarcerated, Al was filled with utter hatred and disgust for all society. It made no sense to him. Why should he be the one punished for killing that savage beast? How was he the criminal in this situation? Al didn't fear prison, but this whole situation infuriated him. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Al's father-in-law was moved with compassion for him. He felt that his daughter had just missed out on a husband who loved her deeply, and so still wanted to do right by him. Being that he was a Bronx fish seller who paid the Corleones for protection and also supplied the finest fish around, he pulled a few of his connections and sought their intervention in releasing Al from prison. But what came as a surprise was that Neri's reputation and name was already widespread across New York. Therefore, Peter Clemenza had already known of Albert Neri and his backstory. He was the fiercest cop on the streets, a man to be reckoned with, and soon word would reach the higher-ups in the family. Clemenza was renowned for having the ability to scout out incredible talent talent for the family, and so he brought it to the attention of consigliere Tom Hagen, soon making its way to the acting Don himself, who then tasked Hagen and Clemenza to look into the case. After looking into the case a lot more, Pete remarked to Tom that maybe we have another Luca Brasi here. After Tom studied the case, he too came to the exact same conclusion as Clemenza. They saw potential in him. They saw a man who was in many ways as strong and fierce as Luca Brasi, a man who was confident enough to take out evil without a second thought. A man with such a devout sense of right and wrong was exactly the kind of person they needed. While Neri was waiting to be transferred, the Corleone family managed to pull some strings and make the whole case just go away. They got him out of prison before he could serve any time. Neri soon understood what happened and knew what his father-in-law was capable of, and so paid his debt back and agreed to divorce his daughter, but now needed to go and thank the man who actually pulled the strings to let him out. Chapter 2. Becoming a Corleone. A short while later, Neri went to the Corleone compound where Michael Corleone met with Neri for the first time. Neri expressed his thanks but was surprised by the overall kindness and respect he was shown. Michael replied, "Hell, I couldn't let him do that to a fellow Sicilian. They should have given you a goddamn medal. But those damn politicians don't give a damn about anything except pressure groups. Listen, I would have never stepped into the picture if I hadn't checked everything out and saw what a raw deal you got. One of my people talked to your sister, and she told us how you were always worried about her and her kid. How you straightened out the kid, kept him from going bad. Your father-in-law says you're the finest fellow in the world. That's rare." They went on to chat for a while. Neri found himself opening to Michael. Although only 5 years younger, Neri talked to Michael as if he was old enough to be his father. Michael eventually offered to set him up with a job in Vegas or help him in getting a loan to start his own business. Although extremely grateful, he politely refused, but said he'll reach out if he needs anything. Michael soon looked at his watch. Neri took this as a sign for his dismissal, but he was surprised to see Michael welcoming him to have lunch with his family and adding, "My father said he would like to meet you." I'm sure you can imagine how Neri replied. As it turned out, word of Al's story reached all the way up to the Godfather himself, who then personally intervened. The Don himself complimented him on his sense of honor and morals, and that's what sealed the deal. Neri finally found a place where he felt at home. The Corleones had their own views on the world and sense of justice that he admired. Only 3 days later, Neri would make one of the biggest decisions of his life. Neri would want to serve the Corleone family, but directly under Michael Corleone. Michael was glad to hear this. He insisted, however, that Neri should go on an all-expenses-paid vacation down in Miami first, at the family hotel, giving Al his first taste of luxury. On his return, he was put in Clemenza's regime, where he was carefully tested and monitored, but any doubts they might have had quickly vanished as his natural ferocity showed that although he was a cop, he was still as ruthless as any other mob enforcer. Clemenza reported back to Michael that Neri was in fact even better than Luca Brasi. However, Clemenza understood that someone like Neri was not a man to be controlled by someone like himself. Therefore, Neri had a unique position within the family, where he was to report directly to Michael himself, with Hagen as the buffer. And that's when we finally meet him in the film. However, Neri's true power and impact is not truly known. He isn't given enough credit considering how important he was. At Don Vito Corleone's funeral, there was this underlying sense of dread and animosity. There was a lot of pressure on Michael, but also on Neri. You see, Neri was part of the new Corleone generation. He was part of a new era headed by Michael, so these next few moves were essentially a matter of life and death. It would be the most decisive point in their lives. If they fail, it's the end for them and the entirety of the Corleone family. But if they succeed, the Corleone family will now be unrivaled. They would have basically conquered the criminal underworld, and Michael the head of it. And soon, the day would finally come. And this brings us back to where we started. Neri remembered all this, his past and the kindness Don Vito had shown him, the gratitude he felt towards Michael, all came back to him at this moment. He was not going to mess this up. And, well, you remember what happened. After this, Al earned himself infamy for taking care of Don Emilio Barzini, the arch-rival of the Corleone Empire, and Don Vito's personal nemesis. But that's not all. But something that very few actually know is that it was Neri who was also responsible for the bullet in Las Vegas casino tycoon Mo Green's eye. He was also present when traitor and former Capo regime Salvatore Tessio was also taken care of. And after Sal Tessio was killed for betraying the Corleone family, Al was promoted to the rank of Capo regime alongside his other duties. With this, Al finally realized that the men of the underworld had a sharper, keener sense of discernment when it came to spotting potential assets. The Corleone family had picked him up from the mud and made him into the feared and revered capo regime of the Corleone dynasty, which gave him a sense of honor and status, something all his years serving as a good guy in the police could not afford him. Even though he believed he was doing the right thing, he had a different view of life now. He'd tasted power and freedom, and for this, he was willing to give anything up. He served the rest of his years in total loyalty to his Don Michael Corleone. In the end, the Corleone family once again returned to its state of power and glory in the underworld. The name Corleone was once again feared. Al was aware of the obscure irony of his slope from respected NYPD policeman to ruthless gangster, but as Mario Puzo accurately puts it in the novel, many young men started down a false path to their true destiny. Time and fortune usually set them aright, which means that in the Corleone family's eyes, there is always time to see the world the right way. Chapter 3: The New Luca Brasi. Now regarded as Michael's most trusted man, Al was more of a Corleone than any other man. When the family moved to Nevada, Al was made senior security officer over all hotels owned by the Corleones. Although he functioned as capo regime alongside Rocco Lampone and Frankie Pentangeli, he was slowly being seen as Michael's second in command. But more than the respect and fortune it brought, there was also the burden of carrying out the tasks and duties assigned to him. All of this he did with the utmost precision, keeping a low public profile but rising up the ranks in Michael's eyes. At this point, he had made his bones, and there was no going back. He was the man to send if Michael needed to make sure there would be no mistakes. From then on, Al carried out all kinds of orders directly from the Don. When Michael needed to secure the loyalty of Senator Pat Gary, Al was tasked to ensure he would become a friend to the Corleone family. He also intimidated Meyer Klingman, a rival who owned a hotel, to sell out to the Corleones. In addition to getting revenge on Fabrizio, Michael's bodyguard in Sicily, who sold him out and was responsible for the death of his wife Apollonia. But that's not even the most important task Neri would undertake. When Michael's brother Fredo betrayed him and the family, it was Al who was tasked with taking care of Fredo. Even though we can see it was something he was not very comfortable doing, especially since he remembered the kindness he had been shown by their father Don Vito. Ultimately, Al had become the greatest enforcer in the Corleone family under the reign of Don Michael Corleone, and without him, Michael would not have been able to achieve much. The depth of the relationship between both men was further emphasized by the fact that even in The Godfather 3, several years later, Al still worked as Michael's bodyguard and underboss, and still manages to save his life multiple times. However, being a Corleone entailed more than just taking care of a number of people. It involved protecting and enforcing the family's heritage and morals. Al was an encapsulation of these values, as he was seen paying respect to Mama Corleone when she passed on. Even in old age, Al's loyalty to the Corleone family extended to Michael Corleone's successor, Vincent. Al and Connie Corleone were the ones who gave Vincent the approval he required to murder Joey Zaza after the helicopter hit at the commission meeting, and when Vincent requested Al's prowess one last time in the murder of corrupt and traitorous Archbishop Gilday. Even though it's unclear what happened to Al after that hit, it's believed that he retired after Vincent ascended the throne as the new Don of the Corleone Empire, and we'll discuss this a bit further in a minute. Chapter 4: Neri vs. Brasi. Now, you've probably noticed the constant comparisons between Al Neri and Luca Brasi, and I'm sure you also thought to yourself as well, who is the better enforcer? There are striking similarities between these two ruthless men, but let's look into it a bit deeper, because it's not as simple as it might seem. Neri was not your regular enforcer. Unlike Brasi, who was huge and mostly intimidating by appearance, Al was more subtle, gentlemanly, and even classy. It wasn't difficult at all for him to blend into the crowd, and even when he was around Michael to protect him, he didn't draw much notice to himself. While Al was constantly being compared to Luca Brasi, both men possessed substantial differences. By virtue of mannerism and appearance, Luca was a strong, brute man who looked fierce and fearless. In contrast, Al could do both, look like every other well-meaning Sicilian, as well as look extremely intimidating. Before meeting the Godfather, Luca Brasi was basically an untamable beast that didn't fear death and had no regard for the sanctity of life, whether his or the other people's. He was famous famous for his strength, and all he did implied evil. The stories and reputation he had described more as a demon rather than just a tough gangster. However, Don Vito saw the raw potential he had and was skilled enough to know how to control him. As the Don puts it, the trick is to make yourself the only person in the world that he truly desires not to kill. He only has that one fear, not of death, but that you may be the one to kill him. He is yours then. Brasi didn't fear death, neither did he fear killing people. The only thing he ever really dreaded was death by the hands of Don Vito Corleone. The Don knew this and used it extensively to his advantage. It was a lesson which he taught his son Michael, and Michael also applied this trick in making Al his own Luca Brasi, even though their relationship was far more of mutual respect and admiration, quite different from what Vito shared with Brasi. And this would change the way Michael viewed his men. But another key difference between these two ruthless men is that Brasi didn't have the kind of emotional stability Al had. He had no sense of right and wrong. In terms of sheer physical strength, of course, Brasi would have the edge. However, Neri was described as someone with unbelievable reflexes and coordination. Added with his sheer ferocity, Neri would be able to intimidate and achieve anything a man as huge as Brasi could, which is why Neri's characteristics fit more efficiently into Michael's method of operation, as Michael wanted to blend in American high society. He was now socializing with CEOs, politicians, and other big shots. Having a 6'6", 320-pound beast guarding you contradicted the sophisticated image Michael was trying to sell. Subtlety was the name of the game for Michael. Al could blend more into society. He was more humane. He showed more emotion. He still possessed that fierce Sicilian temper, but channeled it effectively. But in your opinion, who do you think was the better enforcer? If you were the Godfather and had to choose one of these men, who would you choose? To add to that, if they were to go head-to-head, who would win? Let me know in the comments. And don't worry, I know what you're thinking. The Luca Brasi video is coming very soon. But you need to make sure you like the video and subscribe with the notifications in order to be notified when it will drop. Once you've done that, we can continue. Chapter 5. Al's Death. Now, no one really knows how the story truly ends for Al Neri. We do know that in Part 3 he swears his allegiance to Vincent Corleone, the new Don of the family. But that's about it. But there are some potential answers. In Dean Reisner's draft of Part 3, Al had gotten a call from his nephew Tommy that his sister was ill and Al needed to come see her. He went on the trip with Frankie Rizzi, Connie's son. However, both men were ambushed by some Puerto Rican assassins. At first, he was able to fight back and took out quite a few of them. However, Rizzi was shot in the arm while trying to get his gun. In a bid to protect him, Al is shot in the back by two assassins. He starts coughing blood but tries to raise his gun for a last shot. He is then mercilessly taken out. In another account, the third draft of the script portrays Al as having discreetly taken sides with Don Altobello. He acts as the Altobello spy in the Corleone family. When his betrayal is discovered, he is executed and his body is dumped in the hills of Sicily. While both versions are somewhat interesting, we will never know. But which one do you think was better? In real life, Richard Bright, the legendary actor who played the role of Albert Neri, died at the age of 68 in a bus-related accident. Chapter 6. From Cop to Gangster. As you go deeper into the story, you find whatever it was that Al became in the underworld stemmed from a deep sense of hurt and grief, possibly even regret for all the years he had wasted being in the good books and doing all the right things. First, his wife abandoned him for instilling the fear of God in a wayward child, and he was imprisoned by the law for killing an animal. So when someone like Michael Corleone and even the Godfather himself actually praise him for his sense of honor and justice, it was the first time he was truly appreciated for his work. And when the Corleones basically made him an offer, he simply could not refuse. Loyalty, power, control. Most men in The Godfather failed to master them. Sonny Corleone, too reckless. Fredo Corleone, too weak. Tessio, too impatient. But Al Neri, he got it right. Why? What did he understand about power, loyalty, and survival that the others didn't? Because the same strategies that kept Al Neri alive, the same psychological tactics that made him one of the most trusted men in the Corleone Empire, are the same lessons that determine success and failure in the real world. Miss these lessons, and you'll end up like the men who thought they were untouchable until they weren't. Let's break them down. In the world of The Godfather, betrayal was all too common, from longtime allies to your own flesh and blood. True loyalty was rare. And that's what set Al Neri apart. But Neri's unwavering devotion wasn't just about who he was, it was also a reflection of Michael Corleone's leadership. Michael didn't just demand loyalty, he engineered it. Through power, fear, and strategic control, he ensured that Neri would never question him, never betray him, and never waver. So what made Michael's leadership so effective? How did he inspire absolute devotion in a world where loyalty was a death sentence? Let's break it down. Loyalty in the Mafia isn't just about trust, it's about control, dependency, and power. And Michael Corleone didn't just recruit Al Neri, he shaped him into his most devoted enforcer. Described as watchful, taciturn, ruthless, and unswerving in his loyalty, Neri wasn't just an enforcer, he was a man who devoted himself entirely to Michael. His obedience went beyond duty, it became his identity. But why? What made Neri's loyalty so absolute? The answer lies in psychology, power dynamics, and Michael's mastery of control. 1. The need for belonging. Why Neri needed Michael. The psychology of identity. Before Michael, Neri was a man with no future. A feared but discarded cop. A soldier without a war. A man with nothing left but his own brutality. The system he once served turned on him. His wife left him. His career collapsed. He had no place in the world. That's where Michael stepped in. The Mafia wasn't just a job, it was a new identity. A system where Neri's instincts weren't just tolerated, but valued. And once a man finds where he truly belongs, he'll do anything to protect it. Psychological principle. Social identity theory. People define themselves through the groups they belong to. The Corleones gave Neri purpose when society rejected him. Real life lesson? If you give someone a cause, a role, and a tribe, their loyalty becomes self-sustaining. 2. Michael made Neri indebted to him. The law of reciprocity. Neri didn't just get a second chance, Michael gave him everything. You see, this wasn't just a favor, it was a debt, and a man who owes his very existence to someone, that's a man who never turns. Michael understood Law 11 of the 48 Laws of Power. Without Michael, Neri had no future. Without Michael, Neri was nothing. Psychological principle, the reciprocity rule. When someone lifts you from ruin, you feel obligated to repay them. Real life lesson. Rescue someone from failure and they'll stay loyal, not out of gratitude but out of dependence. 3. Michael gave Neri status and power. Hierarchy loyalty. Traditionally, ex-cops could never become made men. The Mafia didn't trust former law enforcement. But Michael broke that rule for Neri. By personally backing him, Michael made Neri feel untouchable. First, a bodyguard, then a capo regime, finally his underboss, second in command of the Corleone Empire. This sent two messages. I am the reason you have this power. You are above the rules because of me. Michael understood that people don't just want money, they want status. And when a man's power comes directly from you, he'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Psychological principle, status elevation. People cling to those who make them feel important. Real life lesson. If you make someone feel irreplaceable, they will never betray. 4. Michael cultivated religious devotion. Total institution theory. The Mafia isn't just an organization, it's a way of life. Michael ensured that Neri had no world outside of it. Even his Catholic faith, a core part of Sicilian culture, became secondary to Michael. In Neri's mind, Michael was the only higher power he needed to serve. This mirrors how cults and religious institutions create absolute loyalty by stripping away external influences and making their leader the sole authority. Psychological principle, total institution theory. When someone's entire identity is controlled by one group, loyalty becomes absolute. Real life lesson, if you eliminate alternatives, loyalty has nowhere else to go. 5. Michael rewarded ruthlessness and total obedience, operant conditioning. Neri never questioned orders, no hesitation, no doubt. His most infamous test, killing Fredo Corleone, Michael's own brother. Most men would hesitate. Neri didn't, because Michael trained him not to. The Mafia operates on positive reinforcement. The more ruthless Neri was, the more power he was given. Psychological principle, operant conditioning. Reinforce desired behaviors and they become instinct. Real-life lesson: if you create an incentive system where loyalty is constantly rewarded, it will never break. 6. Michael created fear and exclusivity, fear-based loyalty. Michael wasn't like Vito. He didn't balance fear with respect. He ruled through fear alone. Neri saw what happened to Carlo, Tessio, Fredo, Mo Green, and the 5 families. Michael's message was clear: stay loyal or die. As simple as that. But it wasn't just fear, it was exclusivity. By making Neri part of his inner circle, Michael ensured he felt special, privileged to be trusted. Psychological principle, fear-based loyalty. When betrayal means death, loyalty is the only rational choice. Real-life lesson: a leader's power increases when loyalty is rewarded, but betrayal is unthinkable. 7. Michael never let Neri outgrow him, the law of power. Michael trusted Neri, but only to a point. He kept him close enough to be useful, but never let him become too independent. This follows Law 1 of the 48 Laws of Power: never outshine the master. Michael ensured that Neri's entire power base flowed directly from him. He was feared, but not too powerful. He was respected, but not too independent. He was indispensable, but never irreplaceable. The moment a subordinate becomes too strong, they become a threat. Michael made sure that never happened. Psychological principle: dependency reinforcement. A leader remains dominant by ensuring subordinates always need them. Real-life lesson: keep your most powerful allies close, but always below you. Final takeaway: how Michael created a loyal killer. Michael Corleone didn't just win Al Neri's loyalty, he engineered it. He rescued him, gave him a purpose, made him powerful, conditioned obedience, eliminated alternatives, and ensured dependency. The key to absolute loyalty isn't just giving someone something, it's making them believe you are the only source of what they need. Neri didn't stay loyal because of money. He didn't stay loyal because of admiration. He stayed loyal because without Michael, he was nothing. And that's how true power works. There's a reason the saying, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war," has stood the test of time. It's not just about strength, it's about control, about having the ability to unleash that side, but only doing in a purposeful, precise, and restrained way. It's about controlled rage. And if there's one man in The Godfather who embodied this philosophy, it was Al Neri. The power of controlled rage. Why Neri was different. Neri wasn't like Sonny Corleone, a slave to his emotions, loud, reckless, and doomed. He wasn't like a common thug picking fights just to prove himself. He was calm, cold, patient. A man who could sit in the background for months, waiting for the right moment. And when he struck, it was swift, final, and absolute. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just results. This is the difference between an enforcer and a war general. Because unchecked rage, that's self-destruction. A man who lets his emotions dictate his actions will make mistakes, burn bridges, and ultimately get himself killed. But rage that is harnessed and focused, that's a weapon. One that can change the course of events and secure victories. Why controlled rage is more powerful than reckless emotion? It instills fear without chaos. Neri never needed to raise his voice, never needed to prove himself. His presence alone was enough to send a message. And when he did act, it was decisive. No mess, no second chances. It allows you to dictate the battlefield. Michael Corleone understood this. He never struck first out of anger, only when it was strategically necessary. Neri followed the same philosophy. He wasn't fighting for pride, he was fighting for control. It builds an aura of mastery. A man who can fight but doesn't need to commands respect. Uncontrolled men, they are feared in the short term. Controlled men, they become legends. How to cultivate controlled rage like a mafia enforcer. 1. Train the body and mind. Always be ready for war in times of peace. A warrior in a garden is always prepared. Train in self-discipline, strategy, and decision-making. Keep a calm exterior, but a furnace inside. When the time comes to act, you must be ready. 2. Never act on emotion, only on strategy. Sonny Corleone versus Michael Corleone. Sonny acted out of rage, got set up and killed. Michael acted out of calculated anger, eliminated all his enemies in one move. Don't react immediately. Think, plan, then strike. 3. Use silence as a weapon. Neri didn't talk much, but when he moved, people listened. A man in control doesn't need to prove himself with words. His actions do all the talking. 4. Master the art of fear and respect. If you must strike, do it decisively. A man who fights only when necessary commands more fear and respect than a man who fights constantly. Make one move so powerful that you never have to make another. Final takeaway. Control is the real strength. A man who lets rage consume him, he burns out. A man who harnesses it, shapes it, and unleashes it only when necessary, that's the man who survives. Because in the end, power isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait. And when the time comes, you strike once and it's over. Michael Corleone didn't just survive in a world of killers, he mastered it. From a reluctant outsider to the most feared and calculating boss in the underworld, every move he made was a lesson in power, control, and strategy. But what made him different? Why did Michael succeed where others failed? If you understand his mindset, his tactics, and the way he played the long game, you can apply those same lessons to business, leadership, and even everyday life. The answers lie in Michael Corleone's ultimate playbook. Click here to get started.